Welcome back to Open Line. We have with us John Harris, President of Tennessee Firearms Association. We're talking about gun laws in Tennessee. We have in the past, very recently, had Representative Mike Stewart on talking about the need for background checks in Tennessee. Taking your calls now. Let's go to Reverend Fuzz. Hello, Reverend Fuzz.
Hey, Ben.
Hello. What's on your mind?
I'm going to do this real quick. Number one, I want to ask if guns are for safety and protection, wouldn't it be easier and less expensive for us to have more police? I think police are, their purpose is to protect the public. I want to talk about that part of it, but this is the other part. I had a lady I was in court with yesterday who she pulled her gun on 3 people she was afraid they were going to do something to her. They called police. She's been charged with aggravated assault and looking at 2 years, lost her job for 29 years, and she's got to face going to jail for 2 years because she pulled the gun. She didn't shoot anybody. She just kind of diffused the situation. If a policeman had done that, he could have shot all 3 of those people and nothing's been done. I wanted to see if you would comment on something like that. Aggravated assault for pulling out your weapon and not using it.
Okay, thank you. There are 2 issues there. Start with the first one. He's saying if you're concerned about safety, which is the concern people bring up when they say we need more guns, why not? It would be cheaper to have more police, or that would be more effective. What about that?
Part of the problem with the concept or the argument that we can have more police is nobody's quantified how many police it's going to take to make every member of the public feel safe or secure. You know, you're going to put a cop in every car as you're driving to work or commuting across the country. And what's it going to cost? I mean, right now, one of the great freedoms of our country is we've got a constitutional provision that prohibits a standing army. Well, at what point does having an overwhelming police force go from enough to monitor and make arrests to becoming a standing army? You know,
it's a tougher argument. I do see that.
Yeah.
Now, his other question about a woman pulled her gun, she felt threatened, she pulled her gun, now she's been charged with aggravated assault.
Right.
Do you see this happen, and what are your thoughts? She didn't use it, she just pulled it.
Well, she did use it, and that's part of the problem, the way our statute's defined. In Tennessee, we've got a statute, 39-11-611. It's the self-defense statute. And it says you can't resort to deadly force unless you have imminent fear of death or serious bodily injury. Imminent fear of death or serious bodily injury. So it can't be for a property theft. It can't be because they cussed at you. It's got to be something imminent and having bodily injury consequences. Now, the law says in Tennessee that if you display a weapon with intent to use it, brandishing it, pulling it out, pointing it, even if you don't fire it, you've resorted to deadly force.
Okay.
So that the threshold doesn't require that you pull the trigger. Merely pointing it at them, pulling it out, using it threateningly, as if you could discharge it, is what put her into the category of assault with a deadly weapon.
So do you agree with that? Do we need to in your opinion, make changes there, or is that an appropriate thing?
Well, see, what I don't know, and Reverend Fuzz really didn't give me any facts that I could comment on, is was there that threshold issue? Was there a situation of imminent fear of death or serious bodily harm? Now, sometimes what you will see, and this is unfortunate, is that if an officer comes on the scene to investigate something like this, and the facts aren't clear enough, I think what they've been trained is sort of like shoot them all and let God sort it out. Make the arrest, let the magistrate or the district attorney decide, because that's just the first step in the process. And if she had really had a self-defense scenario, it's extremely unfortunate that she's going to have to go through the criminal court system. But I suspect the facts weren't sufficiently clear for the officer to feel comfortable going, now this was self-defense.
So you go out and you buy a gun to protect yourself, and if you unholster it, if you do this, and there are plenty that would argue that's appropriate, but if you unholster it because you're upset, then suddenly you're faced with aggravated assault.
Yes.
And you got a whole host of problems.
Right.
All right. Let's go to Bob. Hello, Bob.
Hello. Very good program as far as it goes. And it's still aren't touching on the new types of criminals, serial and this, that, and the other thing. as well as the bullying, which can start early in school and create some of the incidents. This guns on campus, it's more like back to the western town. They need to incorporate something there. The law.
So are you concerned by that?
Yeah, I'd rather know who's carrying, but that's not going to be it.
All right. He talks about bullying. He talks about his concern. I guess that's his point of view about the guns on campus. Did bullying come into this equation?
I've not heard anything about the bullying. I do know, you know, we didn't touch on the details of the bill, but on the college campuses, for example, if I recall correctly, both of those bills require if employees are being authorized to carry on campus, that a list of the names of people who are doing that has to be given to local law enforcement. Now, the list is maintained confidential by law enforcement, but at least with respect to the public schools, someone will know that they're carrying and that they're authorized to do so. That's not the case necessarily with the private schools, and like I said earlier, I think one of the problems with the bill, the fact that we had 3 bills, is the average citizen isn't going to know easily where they can and can't go.
Right.
Particularly when it comes to the private schools and the fact that they may adopt a policy that says anybody can carry as long as you got a permit.
Now, not that long ago, we had Representative Mike Stewart on. He talked about background checks.
Right.
He bought a gun online, brought the gun before a committee there in the legislature. He was on this show. He talked about all that. I want to play a 2-minute clip from that. Then we'll come back and talk about it. So this is Representative Mike Stewart explaining on OpenLine his point of view on background checks.
Well, what I wanted to show is that you can buy very powerful, very lethal weaponry with no background check at all. A lot of people don't understand that, because we all know if you go to Walmart, if you go to a licensed firearm dealer, you have a background check done before you purchase a weapon, whether it's a pistol or a rifle. And so they run your name through the FBI database, and if you're a felon, if you're on a terrorist watch list, you're not allowed to purchase the weapon. The problem is there is what's called a gun show loophole that's in federal law. It says if it's a private sale, you don't have to have a background check. Well, I don't know if that made sense way back in the 70s and 80s when maybe a background check was really hard to do, but I think we all know now with technology, it's the easiest thing in the world. It takes a few minutes. And so there's just no reason anymore not to require private sellers to get a background check. And you know, because basically if I was on a terrorist watch list, if I was a terrorist suspected of terrorism, you know, I could have with no difficulty taken $750 in cash and bought that weapon. And it's essentially the same weapon that I used to carry around in the military. Back when I was in the U.S. Army, our equivalent M16 was full automatic, had a full auto function. But that, I think, that was gotten rid of while I was in the military. It went to a burst. So the point is, the weapon I bought in a parking lot in Nashville on about an hour and 20 minutes notice is militarily the equivalent of the weapon I used to carry in Korea on the demilitarized zone. It's a very powerful military weapon. You can kill a lot of people with it. If you're a law-abiding citizen and you're not a felon, fine, go buy it. But why do we not want to have background checks to make sure that we exclude drug dealers, hardened criminals, people with lengthy felony, you know, records of felonies, records of violence? Why do we not want those people excluded? I think we obviously do.
So that was Representative Mike Stewart. He was on this show. This very set. It looked very similar, really. And he said what you just heard him say. No reason in this day and age not to have a criminal background check. It takes just a few minutes. He was able to go buy a gun in a parking lot. A terrorist could. A criminal could. No reason not to have a background check. What about that?
Well, I think, as we talked a little bit earlier, since '68, we've had this casual sale exception as a matter of federal law, and it's part of state law. And that system works only because the only people that have to actually perform the background checks are licensed federal dealers that have accounts set up with either the FBI or the TBI to run the checks. So I don't think there's a practical solution, even though it may be technologically feasible, to setting up some kind of system where a citizen could go on a website or make a phone call to some state agency and say, hey, I want to run so-and-so's name and social security number and all this data on them and see if they can or can't purchase. I mean, what we know already with the casual sale rules that are in place is it's a federal and a state felony for someone to sell a gun to someone who can't legally possess it. Even without the background check, that's a felony. So there's a disincentive for someone to sell a gun like they did with Representative Stewart to someone they don't know, unless they check them out. Now, he may have just found somebody that didn't care.
But that probably happens.
Oh, I'm sure it happens.
I bet it happens a fair amount.
It does. And the question becomes, we're going to have a segment of society that can't legally purchase guns, that are going to get access to them one way or another. They're going to steal them. They're going to borrow them. They're going to get them regardless of what safety mechanisms we try to implement. Then you've got a larger, much larger mass of people that live in the country that are hunters, recreational shooters, just average citizens that want the ability to buy a gun from a friend, a neighbor, a relative, without having to go through all the rigmarole of a background check, because they know them. There's no question that they're going to pass the test for these people. And those kinds of conveyances, the question becomes, is it worth all the expense? Is it worth all the regulatory change? Is it worth all the imposition to add in background checks that eliminate the casual sale in the hope, potentially the vain hope, that we're going to stop some people from getting guns when we already know those people have other avenues of access?
But he says they're terrorists that can get guns that way, and hardened criminals, and again we talk about polls, but supposedly according to the polls, the vast majority of people support it. So is this not a compromise? It seems like this is one of those issues, again, that's so emotional. Is this not something that we could find some agreement on? I mean, does it concern you that, to take Representative Stewart at what he said, that a terrorist could look something up on the internet, meet somebody in a parking lot, buy a gun?
Well, that's what happened in California with that shooting, not too many months ago. I mean, he was apparently a terrorist, but if he's running through the system, he might have still been legally able to buy. So the safety net that he's talking about is illusionary. It doesn't necessarily really exist, but yet we're talking about building a huge Chinese wall in the hope that it will have a positive beneficial effect. It's a cost-benefit analysis on society. Government can't do everything.
Okay, all right, we have to take a break. If you're on the line, Clay, Dorian, others, hold on. If you want to call, there's the number 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. We'll take a break. Be back right after this.